Okay, let's dive into this. Think about the world of drugs for a second. It's not just the stuff we hear about all the time, right? It's like this constantly shifting landscape. New things are popping up, often designed to fly under the radar, and they carry these hidden, unpredictable dangers. That's really what we're trying to get our heads around today.
Yeah, exactly. We're zeroing in on what are called emerging drug trends. These often involve, designer drugs, new psychoactive substances. NPS is the shorthand. Basically, chemicals that are pretty new on the scene, or maybe they've just gotten way more common recently.
And for this deep dive, we're leaning on information straight from the National Institute on Drug Abuse and NIDA. They're giving us a window into what the researchers, the public health folks are actually seeing out there right now.
It's valuable insight. Our mission really is to take that NIDA data and sort of distill it down. What are these drugs? Where are they coming from? What makes them so challenging? And importantly, why does understanding this matter for you?
Right, because it's not just academic. NID's info really makes it clear these substances can have serious, unpredictable health consequences, way more potent sometimes. And maybe the scariest part, they can be mixed into other drugs without anyone knowing. That just adds this whole other layer of risk, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Navigating the world today, well, it kind of requires being aware of this shifting hidden threat.
It really does feel like trying to map something that keeps changing shape under your feet. So maybe start with the basics from NIDA. What exactly makes a drug emerging or an NPS?
Well, NIDA defines them simply as mind-altering substances that have, become more common recently. And while, yeah, they're in the usual illicit markets, they also turn up in weird places, like sold online or even in stores disguised as research chemicals or supplements. The sheer number is, well, it's kind of mind-blowing. The UN's counted over 1,000 distinct emerging drugs globally just since 2013.
1,000 in what, just over 10 years? Wow, that seems almost impossible to track. Where do they even come from?
It's a real mix. Some actually started life in legitimate research labs. Maybe they were looking into medical uses, but the drugs just never got approved, never made it to market. Think of them like compounds that were shelved years ago.
Huh. Leftovers from science, basically. But others are made deliberately.
Oh, absolutely. Others are cooked up in illicit labs, specifically designed to mimic the effects of known controlled stuff, opioids, stimulants, benzos, that kind of thing. But they tweak the chemistry just slightly.
Ah, okay, so it's not just accidental discoveries, it's intentional engineering, too. And I bet those slight chemical changes are a big part of the problem.
Exactly. They're chemically similar to regulated drugs, but different enough that, well, they might not be illegal right away. It creates this constant cat and mouse game. Authorities are always trying to catch up, classify the new variants.
Okay, so beyond the legal chase, what makes this whole category such a big public health issue, according to NIDA?
The biggest thing, unpredictability, plain and simple. Because they're new or newly popular, there's often very little hard data on their effects, how toxic they are, how potent they might be. Imagine being an ER doc. You might have no idea what you're actually treating, and the person taking it. They definitely don't know what to expect. Right, and that unknown factor gets even worse when they're hidden in other drugs. Yes, absolutely. Someone might think they're getting, say, fentanyl or maybe a stimulant they're familiar with, but unknowingly they ingest one of these new substances mixed in. That just skyrockets the risk of overdose or weird adverse effects because they have zero clue what they actually took. Given all that, the unpredictability, the hidden nature tracking them sounds like a complete nightmare. How does NIDA even begin to try? It is a massive challenge. NIDA supports things like the National Drug Early Warning System, NDWS. NDWS tries to spot these trends early. They look at ER data, reports from medical examiners, but also, more innovative stuff like testing wastewater, even scraping online forums or social media for chatter about new drugs.
So trying to find the signals in all that noise, catch things before they blow up.
That's the goal. But even with those systems, there's a huge hurdle. Standard drug tests, the kind they use in hospitals, or for toxicology after similar overdoses. They often just don't detect these new compounds.
Wait, really? That's alarming. So you could have someone with severe symptoms, maybe even dying, and the standard tests come back clean for the usual suspects.
Exactly right. And that creates this huge lag. A delay in figuring out what's really circulating, what these things do to people, how to treat exposure or addiction. It's tough to fight something you can't even properly measure.
NIDA's information points to a couple of examples that are especially worrying right now. Let's talk Nitazenes first. What's the deal with this group?
Yeah, Nitazenes. They're a class of synthetic opioids, and they are causing significant concern. They were actually first made way back in the 1950s for research purposes. but like some others we mentioned, they never got marketed. What's really terrifying about them now is their potency.
How potent are we talking? More than fentanyl.
Potentially, yes. Some nitazenes might be as potent or even more potent than fentanyl, and fentanyl itself is already, massively stronger than something like morphine. They started really showing up in the illicit supply around 2019. Seems like especially after rules tightened up around fentanyl-related stuff.
So the market just adapted, found something new, even stronger.
That definitely seems to be the pattern we see. They're often sold as powders, sometimes pills, and crucially, they're found mixed into other drugs. Things like heroin, fentanyl, even benzos. Often the user has absolutely no idea it's in there.
And it's not just one chemical, it's a whole family.
Yeah, that's right. Researchers are tracking quite a few specific ones, names like isotonidazine, protonidazine, etonidazine, metonidazine. Many have been put under emergency controls as they get identified. And like any opioid, the big immediate danger is respiratory depression. They slow your breathing, potentially stopping it.
Okay, but what about naloxone, the overdose reversal drug? Does it work on these?
Well, there's some early NIDA-funded research that offers a bit of hope. It suggests naloxone can work for some nitazenes, but might take higher doses or maybe repeated doses compared to what's needed for fentanyl. This is still being actively researched, though. We need more data for the whole class. And here's a critical point for harm reduction. Standard fentanyl test strips. They do not pick up nitazenes.
That's a really important difference. Wow. Okay, let's switch gears to another one NIDA flagged. Tianeptine. This one seems different, like it shows up elsewhere.
Tianeptine is interesting, yeah. It's described as having opioid effects, but it's not approved for medical use here in the U.S. NERDA-funded research shows it's popping up frequently in products sold as dietary supplements or like cognitive enhancers. You can find it online or even in places like gas stations or convenience stores.
Hold on, so someone might buy something thinking it's a nootropic for focus or just a supplement, and it actually contains an opioid.
Precisely. It might be sold under brand names like Zaza or Tiana. And it's often mixed with other typical supplement ingredients, or even things like kratom or gabapentin. Like other opioids, it carries that risk of dangerously slowing down breathing heart rate. And research shows it can harm the brain, heart, and digestive system too.
And can people get hooked on it, like develop dependence?
Oh, yes. Research confirms it can lead to symptoms of opioid use disorder. Tolerance builds up, and people experience significant withdrawal if they stop. Things like pain, issues with brain function, heart problems, digestive upset. There's some early evidence suggesting medications we use for opioid use disorder, like buprenorphine, might actually help treat tianeptine dependence.
Okay, so these two examples, nitazenes and tianeptine, really show the different ways these emerging drugs can surface. Beyond those specifics, NIDA also talks about broader categories of NPS, right?
Yeah, NPS is that big umbrella term. These are all lab-created compounds. Some are, like we said, tweaked versions of existing drugs trying to skirt the law. NIDA usually groups them by their effects.
Okay, so starting with other synthetic opioids, ones that aren't nitazenes.
Correct. Synthetic opioids that don't quite fit the fentanyl and nitazene mold, but they're also appearing. NIDA mentions examples like brorphine, U47700, like all these emerging synthetics, they're incredibly risky. Same potential for respiratory depression, overdoses, often with potencies that match or even beat fentanyl.
Then you have synthetic cannabinoids, that's the K2 or spice stuff.
Exactly. These are chemicals designed to hit the same brain receptors as THC from cannabis, but they're totally lab-made, and their effects can be way more unpredictable, much more dangerous. Newer ones being identified include compounds like ADMB5, berbutinaka, MDMA. Hard to even say. The worry isn't just weird intoxication, it's severe stuff. Hallucinations, paranoia, extreme confusion, and NIDA's data shows they've been implicated in overdose deaths. They are absolutely not a safe alternative to cannabis.
Right, and synthetic cathinones, the ones sometimes called bath salts.
Yeah, those are lab-made stimulants, chemically related to compounds found naturally in the cotton plant. People sometimes use them as cheaper alternatives to, say, meth or cocaine, but they're also found mixed into other drugs, which just amps up the risks. Emerging examples Dina mentions are Ulone, N-methylpentylone, penolone. Like the synthetic cannabinoids, these have also been linked to overdose deaths, often related to stimulant effects, heart problems, but also intense paranoia, psychosis.
Okay, and lastly, synthetic benzodiazepines. We know prescription benzos calm you down. Are these new lab ones showing up illicitly?
That's exactly it. These are new, recreationally made benzos turning up on the market. And it gives examples like bromazolum, diacylgludiazepam, and fludbromazepam. Like prescription benzos, they depress the central nervous system. The danger is, again, unpredictable potency, the risk of mixing them with other depressants like alcohol or opioids, and zero medical oversight on how they're made or sold.
Man, it's clear this isn't just one or two rogue substances. It's like this dynamic chemical arms race across multiple drug types all at once. So, beyond just spotting these trends, what is NIDA actually doing to tackle this?
Well, NIE is heavily invested in the research side. They fund studies to really understand how these specific new compounds affect the brain and body, to pin down the health risks. They also fund research into developing and testing ways to prevent misuse, effective interventions. And critically, they're studying how harm reduction tools and approaches can be adapted specifically for this shifting landscape, to prevent overdoses and save lives.
So, digging into the science to get a handle on the risks, and also trying to build tools to reduce the harm in a world where the goalposts keep moving.
It's definitely an ongoing battle. Requires constant vigilance, constant adaptation from everyone involved, researchers, health officials, communities.
This deep dive really has illuminated just how incredibly complex and fast moving this whole drug landscape is right now.
It absolutely has. It just underscores the critical challenge these new substances pose, how quickly they emerge, how unpredictable they are, how often they're hidden.
So, we've talked about what emerging drugs are, where they come from labs, illicit production, the incredible speed of change, the huge problems with tracking and testing. We looked at potent examples like Nitazenes, Tianeptine showing up where you wouldn't expect, and those broader NPS categories, synthetics across opioids, cannabinoids, cathinones, and benzos, each with their own dangers.
hmm And we touched on NEDA's vital role through things like NDEWS and their research support, trying to understand these things, study their effects, build strategies for prevention and harm reduction in this, really dynamic situation.
I think the core message here, really reinforced by the NIDA info, is that dealing with the risks of these substances, it's not a problem you solve once. It's this constant evolving process because the drugs themselves keep evolving.
Which means the information, our collective understanding, has to be just as dynamic, just as fast-moving as the chemistry itself.
And maybe that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. If new substances pop up this fast, if they're this hard to identify in the moment, and they can be hidden so easily in other drugs, what does that really mean for the basic challenges of public health and safety? And how can our understanding possibly keep pace with that kind of rapid change?